Hey, welcome to Younger and Older. This is Jason and Dave hanging out at the studios at Birch Ranch in the Northwoods of Wisconsin. And we enjoy just getting around the table and having some good conversation, whether it's about what's going on at the time, whether it's just different biblical principles, talking about just life in general, maybe even as I'm a younger guy at a different stage of life that you were maybe, 30 years ago.
Yep.
I had 3 boys at home, and you're at the other side of it where your kids are all grown up and out of the house and all that sort of stuff. And so it's just a great opportunity to talk about different biblical principles, how it applies to life, and even how we can challenge ourselves to use those principles to view kind of the chaos that is everyday life now.
Right.
Just because we're inundated with so much stuff, so much media, so much input, that oftentimes we don't. I feel like we intake so much, but we don't process it as much anymore.
Right.
And that's kind of what we do, is we kind of process together on this show.
Well, and a lot of times those that come to camp and have seen both of us, because we've been here forever, and you might talk to us a little bit, but here you get in to sit in on a discussion on something. And I remember when I was young how important it was. I would go places with my dad, and my dad was talking to people who I thought were important. His good friends were the guys who started Awana, and they'd go out and have lunch or something, and I could go sit there with them.
Yeah.
And I would listen to them talk.
Yeah.
And I was thinking the other day what made podcasting interesting for people, and I think that's it. They get to sit in on a discussion of somebody else talking.
It's like being a fly in the wall.
Yeah, and I enjoyed that as a kid, and I didn't contribute anything. I mean, if I went out to breakfast with my dad and his buddies, I was busy eating.
Yeah.
They give me something, and I would be eating that, and I would just sit there and listen.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're listening to the guy who started Awana and worked that, and guys who started camps, and they all have this mind frame, and then eventually you get that mind frame.
Yeah.
Because you're listening to them on a regular basis, and you're listening to how they process information.
Yeah.
And very, very interesting stuff. A lot of times I am concerned with, and we talked about on the last podcast, with how unhappy our nation is and how unhappy young people are.
Mm-hmm.
One of the reasons young people are unhappy, and we've said this time and time again, is because of the confusion that's out there.
Right.
Okay, when you're confused, you act confused. And when you act confused, you don't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Confused people just stand there and go, I don't know what to do. I'm confused.
Yeah.
So that life becomes that. So you ask a young person today what they're doing in life, and they're going, I don't know. That immediately tells me you're confused.
Yeah.
Why? Because that's the fruit of confusion. The fruit of confusion is confusion. And that means you don't do anything. Because confused people don't go, charge, let's go up the hill. No, I'm confused. I don't know where the hill is. I don't even know if I want to charge up the hill. Why would I go up the hill? That would be their questions.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I really want to encourage young people to do is quit living in confusion.
Absolutely.
Go back to the last podcast we had, listen to it, because we were laying out some principles for truth.
Yeah.
And begin to live your life by the principles that are given to us in God's Word. And when you do that, the confusion melts away.
Mm-hmm.
Very simple and few things clear confusion.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you a quick example. There is a God, we're not Him. Okay, I'm not confused about who's in charge now anymore.
Right.
Because God is in charge.
Yeah.
In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. I've said, okay, now I'm not confused about where the world came from. I'm not confused about how it came into existence. In the beginning, God created Adam and Eve. He created male and female. I'm really not confused on genders. I'm not confused about that. That doesn't, those that are making things way too complicated, because God made male and made female. He didn't make anything else. And he didn't make a mistake.
Right.
When I start feeling like I'm not important, I can go and find the principle in the Psalms that says that God formed me while I was in my mother's womb. Okay, He didn't make a mistake. He formed me the way He wanted me. I'm not confused.
Mm-hmm.
The only time I get confused is when I get my eyes off the very simple principles in the Bible.
Yeah.
So now I'm wondering what other people who don't know God, don't know the Bible, what they're saying, what they're thinking. I'm wondering about that.
Yeah.
That's not healthy. At that point, I get sick.
Yeah.
So when you're young, though, it's not like you can have a crystal ball and see into the future.
No.
But there are things you should do when you're young. And when you're young, if you do these things, you're preparing yourself for whatever comes in the future.
Right.
I just spoke to a high school group, and I was trying to encourage them to think about King David, when he was a young man.
Okay.
Now, King David, I believe he's about 3,000 years ago, we're talking now.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I think he was about 1,000 years before Jesus.
Okay.
We're still talking about him.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Can you imagine if somebody's talking about you 3,000 years after
later.
you die?
Yeah.
That's pretty incredible by itself. He was the great-grandson or something like that of Ruth and Boaz.
Yes.
So he's in that line. And so David, Ruth, Boaz, I mean, it's kind of just interesting stuff, nothing more than that at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But David was a young man, and we know that one of the major stories with David was not only he became king, but he took down Goliath.
Right.
So here he is at a point in his life where there's this giant, and everybody who's trained to fight, everybody who's a big shot in the army is afraid of Goliath.
Mm-hmm.
And David walks up he's just a kid.
Yeah.
And he walks up to give his brothers some food or whatever he was supposed to
bring
do.
in some lunch.
Yeah. And he looks at this Goliath that comes out and he goes, "What's with this?"
Mm-hmm.
This is my own version. But he kind of looks at it, what is going on here?
Why aren't you guys doing something about this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And nobody is. He goes, "Well, I'll go fight him."
Mm-hmm.
Now he was one of 7 brothers.
Yeah.
I don't know how many brothers were in the army, but several.
Yep.
Like you can imagine, you have 3 sons.
Oh, yeah.
You need 4 more. Yeah.
Anyways, back to David.
Yeah. Well, can you imagine growing up in a home with 7 boys?
Sometimes 3 boys. I'm like, whew.
Yeah.
Well,
7 boys.
Oh,
Now, it would be fun.
It would be. It would be fun.
It's just one of those things where it'd be a high energy
yes.
kind of thing. And David's on the younger side. David must not be the best looking one because, again, when they went after the king, don't
Are
look
you
at the
saying that
status.
because he's the youngest?
No, because the Bible said don't look at the appearance, don't look at the status, kind of thing. So you look at the whole thing and you think, okay, David, man, he was a shepherd.
Yeah.
He was sent to give his brothers some food. He sees Goliath and he gets ticked that Goliath is defying God.
Mm-hmm.
My question as an older guy is, where did he learn to be upset by that?
Yeah.
It's not like you start in life all of a sudden one day being upset that somebody defied God.
Mm-hmm.
So David had a relationship with God.
Yeah.
Can you have a relationship with God if you're young?
Absolutely.
How do you do that?
You spend time getting to know who God is.
In the Word, you open the
Yep.
Bible. You go to a youth group where they're teaching, and you don't just do it for the fun. You want to learn. Get yourself involved with some older Christian people and talk to them about what they're doing in life. And come to a place like Birch Ranch and bring your friends there so they can hear the gospel. And you just begin to be somebody who knows God. And like anybody in life, if you want to know somebody, you spend time with them. So you need to spend time with God.
Yeah.
Well, David, obviously, when he was young, when he was taking care of sheep, he's back whatever field the sheep are in.
Yeah.
But he's spending time getting to know God.
Mm-hmm.
So, number one thing, I think, if you really want to be put in a position where one day you can be used significantly of God, no matter where you are, number one is get to know God.
Absolutely.
Another thing that I see in David was he was responsible.
Mm-hmm.
He was a shepherd.
Yeah, he was put in charge of the flock. Right? It's a flock?
Yeah. It's not a herd. No, it's a flock.
Okay. when that came out, I'm like...
Or those birds?
I don't know.
Sheep. Herd. Sheep, flock. Flock. Let's go with flock.
Okay. I don't know why, but when I said it that time...
now you got me down life. All right.
Sorry.
Anyway.
He was put in charge of the group of sheep.
Yeah, he was the sheep guy. The shepherd. And if you read the Psalms, you read all kinds of influence that he had while he was a shepherd.
Yeah.
And understand the 23rd Psalm.
Yeah.
The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Very important to understand. David understood what it was to be a shepherd. Now, at a young age, he must have understood responsibility then.
Yeah.
So he was given a responsibility to do something, and he did it.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that because in the Bible, when he was explaining why he was going after Goliath, he said this. In fact, let me get it on my thing here.
Yeah, because as he took care of the sheep, one of the things that he had to do was to protect them, and so that was part of their livelihood and part of his family. And so if his parents put him in charge of that, they knew that he had the capability to to do that, because in those days a shepherd had to spend essentially 24/7, keeping an eye over the sheep, because whether it be wolves or lions or bears, and it's not like nowadays where you just pull out the rifle.
Right.
Everything was
No, and I'll
very
read
primitive.
you his assessment of it.
Yeah.
1 Samuel 17:34-37.
Okay.
So they're thinking, okay, David, you can't beat Goliath. Nobody can beat Goliath. You're a shepherd boy. You have no training. You have no status. But David's going, you're going to let this guy insult God?
Right.
Okay, his relationship with God was. So here's what he says.
And what he knew about God.
Yep. And here's what he said to the king in those. He said, your servant, meaning David, your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of the Philistine.
Yeah.
All right, now if you catch his background at all, what's he saying about his responsibility and what he did with it? He was responsible. Those sheep, so many times I have thought in my life, if I'm a shepherd and a bear wants a lamb, take it.
I mean, yeah. I mean, even as you're reading, he's like, he went after the lion. It's like, man, would I run after a lion that has a sheep? I'd be like, well, I got about 299 other ones here.
Certainly, Dad would understand.
It's a lion, Dad. It was pretty big. I had a little stone in my, from a practical perspective, that's the way that we think. But no, I mean, he was resolved to protect his sheep.
Right. He was somebody who was so responsible that he knew that his job was to take care of the sheep.
Yeah.
And he was going to do that, and he trusted that God would help him do that because he knew God.
Yeah.
Now remember, I'm saying this about a guy who knew this when he was young.
Yeah.
He didn't wait till he was older. You should not be waiting until you're older to be somebody who knows God and listens to God and is responsible in life.
Absolutely.
And he was responsible. And I can't help but think he went after the bear. He grabbed the bear and the lion at different times, and he killed them by hand.
By hand, because he says he grabbed them out of the sheep out of their mouth.
Absolutely an incredible thing.
Yeah.
Now, I know through life, I had responsibility very early when my dad started the ministry here at Birch Ranch, and so I was given responsibility. And I think that that's one of the most important things a young person can do is when you are given a task when you're young, you need to do it and do it well.
Yeah.
And you need to have the reputation that when you're given a job, you know what's expected of you and you do beyond what's expected of you. When I was a kid, my dad used to tell me a story about a guy, and I don't know if it's a true story or not, and I can't even remember all the details, so we're not gonna dwell on the story itself. I remember the major point.
Okay.
But the major point was there was a janitor in a very big company one time, and this janitor knew his responsibility was to clean things, clean the floors, and he did such a good job that he always went and cleaned the very corners of every floor that he cleaned.
Yeah.
To make sure that there was nothing in the corners, nothing under the desks. And one day, one of the guys that was supervising him noticed how he was so diligent cleaning the corners when before that the corners always had junk in them, and people would sweep the floor but not really get into the corner because that was the hard part to do. And eventually he got promoted, eventually he ran the company.
Yeah.
Now, my dad then, as I grew up, he would just say, hey, no matter what job, give me the grass to do or whatever else, he'd say, don't forget the corners. I knew what he meant.
Yeah.
He meant, very few people care whether you get the corners or not. Very few people are going to look in the corners. But if your job is to clean the floor, get the corners.
Get the corners. Yeah.
And that was the idea of being responsible. And I'm glad my dad did that constantly as I grew up.
Yeah.
It was always telling me, no matter how small of a job you have, So anybody that's listening to us today, no matter what you're doing in life, if you're going to cook a dinner for somebody, fine, cook it, clean up after yourself, put everything away, make it so that, take the whole responsibility for everything. At camp, when you give somebody a job, like being in dish crew or being a lifeguard or whatever else it might be here, it's like you want them to take responsibility for it and do it right. Don't cheat.
Yeah.
There's a saying out there, when you do cheat, you know what they call it?
What?
Cutting corners.
There you go.
So my dad had it right when he was talking about don't ignore the corners. When you cut the corners, you just go around them because your sweeping or your mop just goes around there and it doesn't get in the corner. You just didn't clean the whole thing like you're supposed to.
Yeah.
So I want young people to say, if you're going to be responsible, work at being responsible. If you're in school now, you should do the homework, and you should do it to the best of your ability.
Absolutely.
If you're not getting the grade you want, here's what a responsible person does. They go to the teacher and they say, I am not getting the grade I want. What do I need to do different? That's responsible. It's not, the teacher's a bum and they don't teach me like they should, and I'd be better off with a teacher that told a joke every 30 minutes, or something. Don't do that. Go to the teacher and say, I am not learning like I should be learning. What do I need to do different?
Right.
That's personal responsibility at that point. So we know that David was responsible.
Yeah.
He knew God, and he chose to be responsible. There's another interesting thing that I like about David that shows his habit as a young person.
Okay.
When the king, later on in life, when he was chosen to be the next king, but he wasn't king yet,
Yep.
and the king wanted to be comforted, he called for David to play the harp.
Yeah.
Now, have you ever played a harp?
No, but I've seen it, and there's not many people that play a harp.
Yeah, I'm thinking that's not the easiest instrument to master.
That's my guess. I mean, I've tried playing guitar.
It's got less strings.
It does have less strings. I haven't gotten that far.
Yeah.
But then even looking at the harp, it's like, wow, that's quite the, and knowing that not many people actually choose to play the harp, now given they're a little bit more expensive, but still, it's a challenging instrument.
Yeah, I'm not musical, but I can tell you that.
That you're not musical? No.
I can tell you that I'm not musical. I can also tell you that a harp has got to be a few hours of work.
Oh, yeah. Knowing that you could play the harp and play it well, where a king would specifically ask you to play it,
right.
That says something.
Right.
That means there's been some effort and some time and some intentionality
right.
to get to that point, which is impressive.
So you're looking at a young man who is responsible.
Yeah.
He knew that he was supposed to take care of the sheep, and even bear and lion weren't going to get those sheep. He was one who knew God.
Yeah.
Because when God was defiled by, Goliath, he said, no, you're not doing that. And God will protect me. He knew that God could protect him because of his responsibility. That's the interesting part.
Yeah.
Now, some people don't know. I don't know if I can trust God. The way that David knew that he could trust God with Goliath was because he was responsible with the sheep, and he went after the bear and lion and saw God provide for him there. There will be times in everybody's life as you get older where there's very difficult decisions to make down the road.
Yeah.
If you understand, like I do, who God is, what he's doing is he's preparing you today for those. But if you're going to be irresponsible, you're not getting prepared. If you're going to not spend your time getting to know God, you're not going to be prepared.
Yeah.
Then you take David. It's like, well, what good is harp music going to be for whatever he's going to do in life? I wonder what David wanted to grow up and do, because being king isn't like for anybody who's
right.
It's not like a child of that day said, well, I hope one day I grow up and be king. No, you need to be in the family of the king.
Right.
So that wasn't a dream of his.
Yeah.
So he had no idea that he was going to be king one day. And not just a king, but as I told you, he's from the line of David.
Yeah.
He's David.
He's David.
He's David in the line of David, which is eventually the line that Jesus came from. And this is 1,000 years before that.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely incredible. I love the idea that David understood his responsibility. He understood how to make himself the one that people want in a harp concert,
Mm-hmm.
if there was such a thing there. And the other thing is, he was physically fit.
Yeah.
Sometimes we don't think about that when we're young, but you should not be sitting around when you're young just in a chair all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You should be out exercising, staying physically fit. The body is very unique, and that the more you work it, the better shape it stays in.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, if he could run after a bear or a lion,
Oh yeah, and destroy it.
Yeah.
Essentially,
Yeah.
You got to be pretty fit to do that.
he's got to be.
Yeah.
So here's a guy who didn't stay away from exercise or challenges. He wasn't full of excuses. When I think of my reaction to a lion or a bear and how I would say, "Please take it,"
Mm-hmm.
I think, well,
Yeah.
I don't have the right reaction.
Yeah. Well, and to me, the interesting thing about this that I keep going back to is that as David was a young, I say kid, but teenager, I would say is probably the right comparison. And he knew God in a way that impacted his life to be responsible, to use his situation to do the best that he could.
Right.
So that way, when he was faced, bringing lunch to his brothers, and he sees this guy, like it seemed like there was no hesitation to him. It was just like, wait a second, here's the God I know, the God that I'm living for. Why isn't anybody stepping up to him?
Yeah.
And we see that same resolve in other young people. I think of Daniel,
Right.
and his buddies.
Right.
I mean, the first story we see is them, not eating the king's food. Why? Because they're like, wait, I'm not going to get
Right.
chunky and fat.
But there were only 4 of them.
Right.
The rest compromised.
The rest compromised. And it says that they were the strongest and best, and eventually the king said, no, you guys are going to eat like these guys. And then later on we see Shadrach and Benny,
Yep.
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And they're still young. I don't know what their age was, but they're still younger guys, or what I'm considering younger.
Right.
And they knew God in a way that even, much like David, even staring at the face of certain death, we're still saying, no, what are you guys doing? This
Right.
is the God that we live for.
Right.
Don't you know that? And to me, that's the thing that if we were to learn, or if you, as you're listening to this podcast, to challenge yourself, like, man, right now in my life, I can get to know God like that and live in a way that as I face situations in life, I know the truth about God.
Right.
Imagine how our lives would change and how satisfied we'd be.
Yep.
I think oftentimes in our culture, we think that we can't be spiritually mature until we're your age, Dave.
Right. And that's not the case. You start preparing when you're young.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what's ahead. David had no idea he was going to be king. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had no idea they were going to walk in a furnace one day.
No.
Daniel had no idea that he would be thrown in a lion's den and sleep with lions overnight one day.
Right.
No idea. So something in their life prepared them for those moments.
Yeah.
And right now, if you're listening, now is the time to be prepared for what you don't even know what's coming up tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some basic threads that you have to work on.
Yeah.
Number 1, you need to know God.
Absolutely.
Number 2, you need to be responsible in life.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you know God, you want to honor God, no matter where you work in life. You don't work for money, first of all. You work because you need to work. You work to honor God. You work, and you'll get paid something if you work somewhere. That's fine. Then you use your money, not for self-indulgence, but for what God put it in your life to be used for.
Mm-hmm.
See, God becomes the focus of your life. And when that happens, you can start to live a fulfilled life.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that don't feel fulfilled today. They're not challenged today. They don't. And the reason is because they're not fulfilled, because they're not living the way God put them on the earth to live.
Absolutely.
So it's your choice.
Yeah.
The fruit of the Spirit, as we talked the last program. You need to identify what in life it is that you want to accomplish, and you can do that at a young age. So for David, for example,
Yeah.
his situation when he was young and a shepherd was, okay, I know that I want to be successful at being responsible as a shepherd.
Yeah.
Well, what does that mean? Well, you need to learn about sheep.
Mm-hmm.
When I was young here at Silver Birch Ranch, my dad put me in charge of the stables for several summers.
Okay.
Now, I grew up in Chicago. I wasn't one. I liked horses, but I didn't know much about them.
Yeah.
And And so what I had to do is be responsible.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did is I went to a farmer who raised animals. And
Yeah.
I said, what do I do with these things?
Sure.
I mean, how do you take care of them? What do you do? And so I listened to that farmer.
Yeah.
And then I went to the farmer to get the food. And then I went, and before you know, what I did was I acted responsible. I didn't come up and say, I don't know anything about horses. I'm not a farmer. I grew up in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
No, my dad said, we need somebody to run the stables. We need someone to take care of the horses. I liked horses. Is it like owning a cat?
Right.
I mean, or something? Well, okay, I can do it. I've ridden them. I've been at camp. I've seen how horses are integrated. All right, I can do it.
Mm-hmm.
But then part of the responsibility was going to learn more about it so that my dad didn't have to learn more.
Right.
He wasn't putting himself in charge of the horses. He was putting me in charge of the horses.
Yeah.
So I needed to learn and not say, well, what do you expect? I don't know anything about horses, so that's why nothing's working.
Right. And you didn't say, well, Johnny's not taking care of the horses. Why do I need to take care of the horses?
Right.
And I think sometimes we even throw that into our excuses rather than just embracing the fact that God puts us in a situation to be responsible. Oftentimes we just say, hey, well, so-and-so doesn't have to do it. Well, why do I have to do it?
Yeah.
Well, because God didn't call that person in that situation to do it. He called you to.
Yeah.
And maybe you're listening to the show and God has put you in a situation that you've been avoiding. And right now he's tapping you on the shoulder saying, no, you need to lean into that.
Yep.
Because I think nowadays we kind of push kind of that hardness away. If it gets hard, it's just like, that's not worth doing.
Yeah.
But lean into that, because that's where responsibility shines, and that's where you get to know the heart of God, is in those moments where he wants you to be dependent on him. I mean, you look at David. I'm sure at the time, taking care of sheep wasn't, top on his priority, but it's what his dad asked him to do.
Yep.
Because it was his father's sheep. He's like, all right, you're going to be in charge of this.
Yep.
And so he did it with all that he had.
Yep. And here's, I would challenge, we're in Christian camping at Birch Ranch, Nicolet Bible Institute, Northwoods Retreat. I mean, that's what we do.
Yeah.
We do it because young people come here and we get to help them learn those things about being responsible.
Yeah.
I think if you're listening and you're in college and you're in high school right now, I would love you to consider coming up here for part of the summer, all of the summer, and learn the things in life that will propel you to excellence.
Yeah.
You don't need to know where you're going to end up. But it doesn't matter. We still know as teachers that we can come and teach you the things that will make you successful no matter where you go.
Yeah.
And that's the principles you need to know in life.
Right. And I think that if you just start there, I think God will do amazing things.
Yep.
And you'll see some cool things happen. And so I encourage you, think about what you can do in your life to be intentional, just like David was intentional, and buckle up to see what God does in and through that, because I think you'll be more satisfied along the way, because you won't be worried about what everybody else is doing. Unfortunately, we're out of time here on Younger and Older. This is Jason and Dave. We look forward to connecting with you next time and having another conversation. Take care. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.